Additional aids and services are available upon request to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, you may contact us by email by clicking Help or sending an email directly to pdportal@tamu.edu. You can also contact us by phone, including Relay Texas, at 1-800-441-7323 or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas, 77843.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sudie Whalen, and thank you for joining me for the Instructor Leadership Excellence Academy first kickoff webinar. We're really excited to have you guys here. So on with the call with us today is our fabulous team from Texas. We have Ms. Lori from the Texas Workforce Commission, Beth, Olga, and Robin, all from TCAL, and we're really, really appreciative of their support that they're offering to us now on this webinar and then ongoing on the background. They're doing so much work to make this academy excellent for you guys, so we are really excited and really happy to have them on board. Your facilitation team for the academy is myself and Amy Dalsimer. A little bit about me, and I'll have Amy introduce herself in a moment. I'm a technical assistance consultant with American Institutes for Research. I actually was part of the Instructional Leadership Excellence Academy last year and really enjoyed working with the fantastic instructors and coaches and teacher leaders that come out of Texas. And I'm really excited to work with even more teacher leaders this year with all of you. And so my background, I come from teaching in adult ed as a lead career technical education teacher at an adult education agency here in California. I went from that into working here at American Institutes for Research. Prior to that, I was consulting with AIR on different projects specific to collaborative team building. My areas of expertise are collaborative team building, communities of practice, professional learning communities, career technical education, and integrated education and training. So if you have questions about any of those areas or anything related to the Academy, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You'll be getting a lot of information later on about how to do so. But before I ramble on, I'm going to go ahead and let Amy introduce herself.
Great. Thanks, Sudie. Welcome, everybody. I'm really looking forward to working with you and meeting you in person soon. I'm Amy Dalsimer. I'm a senior technical assistance consultant at AIR. I started my career in adult ed about 30 years ago as an instructor. During my time teaching, I taught ESL. Back then we called it GED and also college prep classes. And then I went on to move up into a position of curriculum developer, instructional leader, then into coordinator, and finally as the executive director of a large adult education program at LaGuardia Community College in New York City. Since I've been with AIR, I've had the really good fortune of working on a number of professional development and technical projects, including in Texas, having the ability to develop and train for the Texas 2.0 content standards, and also leading the academies last year, specifically the one geared for administrators. So I'm really excited to be a part of this and to get to know you all.
Thank you, Amy. So let's go ahead and dive into our day. So we're going to have some brief time for introductions. I'm going to share with you the overview of the Academy and sort of what's expected of you as you're engaging in these activities and in this process. We're going to have an introduction to the adult education teacher competencies. You're also going to get to see what the learning portal looks like in our community of practice. And then we'll talk about upcoming assignments and next steps after this webinar. So if you're wondering, what is the purpose of ILEA? What are we doing here? You might be among company. So the reason why we're here and what we're planning to do is to identify and apply specific concepts about instructional leadership in the context of the adult education teacher competencies. You're going to learn a lot about what those are shortly. So if you're feeling confused in the moment, don't worry, we're going to talk more about that. We're also going to identify opportunities for instructional improvement based on a self-assessment done through the adult education teacher competencies and using program data as well. And then we're going to talk about skills and support that lead to instructional improvement projects and what kind of instructional improvement project that you're going to be doing across this entire academy. So it's going to be a long-term project, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So before we deep dive into all of these concepts that we just discussed, I want to know a little bit about you. So in the chat box, if you could share your name, your agency, what your role is, what do you do at your agency, and then tell me a little bit about why you applied for ILEA. What drew you to this academy? And you can do that in the chat box. Did you decide to sign up because you wanted to learn more about leadership skills? You want to take on more of a leadership role at your agency? Why did you apply? Tell me about you also. Is it pronounced Desiree? Is that correct? If I mispronounced your name, I apologize. If you're having difficulty locating the chat pod, let us know by raising your hand with the function at the top. Desiree said she's in Region 17. She's an ESC teacher. Signed up to continue growing as an instructor and a professional. Awesome. Ryan's a program specialist. Welcome. Focus on improving leadership skills. Wonderful. Pedro, welcome, Pedro. You were invited by your supervisor. Wonderful. He's from Dallas County Community College District. Great reason, connecting with colleagues across the state. I like that, to share and receive strategies about improving instruction. That's what we're going to be doing. That's what we want to do. Wonderful. Jennifer is lead teacher and soon-to-be academic coordinator. Congratulations. She wants to grow as a leader in the field. Fantastic. And she was also invited by her supervisor. Wonderful. Oh, can you let me know if additional responses come in that I may have missed? I think I see one more from Jennifer. So Jennifer is the lead teacher. Oh, okay, I saw that one already. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and move on. If anything else pops in, Olga will let me know. So of you on this call and within this group, there are 12 participants of ILEA this year. Two teams that are coming from, two teams of two or more that are all coming from the same agency. So it's awesome to have a couple of teams in here who may know each other, or at least work within the same agency. And then we also have 5 programs that have participants that are both in ILEA and ILEA, the Leadership Excellence Academy. So that's fantastic. Welcome, Ronnie and Jamie. I see you guys in there. So let's talk about what our schedule is going to look like over the next few months. So we have 4 webinars, the one today, of course. We have another one coming up February 19th, again in April, then in September, and then a couple of small online meetings in July. Additionally, we're going to have 3 actual training days in Austin. That'll be March 3rd, June 2nd, and November 10th. In between time, we'll be using the PD portal to communicate and collaborate, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. You'll have assignments that you have to submit using the PD portal, and then you'll also have an overarching instructional improvement project. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that later, mostly when we meet with you guys later. But ultimately, you're going to have an overarching project about something you want to do to improve instructional practices at your agency or for yourself, and then you're going to work on that over the course of the entire academy. So here we are looking at that on the timeline, because sometimes visual is easier than looking at just the words. And so we are right here on January 22nd. I can slow down. Thank you for that. So we're currently here on January 22nd. As you can see on our timeline, we will go from now all the way through to November. So we have about a little less than 10 months with you guys. So it's plenty of time for us to collaborate, work together, get feedback from not only facilitators, but also your colleagues on this that are doing this training with us about your projects, about different things that you're struggling with or things that you're doing really well, and sharing those successes and challenges. And we're going to be here to support each other all along the way and across this entire timeline. Your expectations, however, are that you attend every day of the training, attend all webinars or complete makeup assignments if you have to miss a webinar. And then you also need to complete all assignments, including your instructional improvement project, in order to complete this academy. Our wonderful friends at TCAL are fantastic with helping me keep track of all assignments submitted and knowing where we are with everything. And then we'll follow up with you if you see you're having a hard time or struggling. Or if you start to feel like you're going to fall behind or you're having a hard time, please don't hesitate to reach out to us so that we can try to support you in staying on track and on task. So let's talk about the adult education teacher competencies. I just want to pause really quick right here. Does anybody have questions about the expectations or about the schedule before I move into kind of the meat of this webinar? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So the adult education teacher competencies are accessible on the LINKS website. That's a site managed by OCTAE, the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education. And this is a project that was put together a few years back that created competencies for teachers. So let's talk a little bit more about what they are. Before we deep dive, though, I want to ask you guys a question. I want you to just look at these 4 statements and tell me which one resonates with you the most. Now, keep in mind, there's no wrong answer. Any one of them could resonate with you, but I just want to hear what you think. 1, it's important to adapt instruction based on formative and summative assessment data. 2, it's important to use instructional techniques that are effective with adult learners. 3, it's important to communicate high expectations of learners and motivate them to persist and meet their goals. Or 4, it's important to possess content area knowledge and teaching skills required for subjects and populations taught. What do you think? Which one is kind of standing out to you the most? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Pick the one that feels the most important to you or that you relate to the most. And just type the number in the chat. Pedro said all. Amy said number 3. Jennifer 2. Romney said 3. Okay. Desiree says 2 and 3. Ryan said 3. Okay. So it looks like a lot of people are really resonating with number 3, that communication is expectation of learners and motivating them. That's true. Very good. I think all 4 of them are pretty important, but it depends on what your perspective is. But this was just kind of an example of having to sort of identify which one of the 4 items do you feel like is most important to you. You're going to be doing that a lot when we get further into the self-assessment piece, but it's important to kind of, for me to understand where you are. When you think of the word competencies, and you can put your response in the chat, when you think of competencies, what do you think of? What comes to mind? When I say competencies, what pops in your head? How do you feel? What we should teach and what students need to learn. Thank you, Desiree. Expectations about the ability to effectively do something. Great. Thank you, Amy. Skills, knowledge to be learned. Thank you, Pedro. Strengths are what we do well or should be able to do. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so when we hear the word competencies, we think of different things. Hi, Yoliette. I remember you from last year. And she said, she joined to help instructors succeed in the classroom. Romney said when she hears competencies, she thinks of confidence, that you have enough knowledge to demonstrate a concept. Wonderful. So let's actually look at the definition. According to David Dubois, who has done significant work on competency-based management and evaluation, the definition of competencies are characteristics, knowledge, skills, mindsets, thought patterns, and the like that when used, whether singularly or in various combinations, result in a successful performance. So when we do these things, all of these things, either individually or collectively together, they result in a successful performance, or as Jose just said, a mastery of knowledge and improving skills. Great. So in the chat, I want to know where you are in terms of the competencies. Are you familiar with the adult education teacher competencies? And if so, have you used them or are they being used at your agency? And if you're not familiar with the competencies, how are the teachers on your site evaluated? Are there teaching standards in addition to the content standards? What evaluation criteria or competencies do you use? Are you familiar with them? If so, how are you using them? If not, how are teachers evaluated? And just put your response into the chat, please. Romney says, not familiar, okay. I haven't heard of them. Links, yes. Competencies, no. Teachers are evaluated on student outcome data. Thank you, Amy. We use them and reflect through the Content Standards 2.0. Thank you, Pedro. Jennifer says she's not yet familiar, generally using these ideas, though. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So the purpose of the competencies is to kind of provide a structure for the knowledge and skills that we expect of any adult educator. So whether we're talking about, Yoliet said using 2.0 standards and data. Thank you, Yoliet. So when we're looking at the competencies, we're thinking about what skills do I need to have to be an effective adult education teacher? And then those competencies are organized into manageable parts and components that kind of help teachers understand how they can reach those targets. So instead of just being a list of standards expected to meet, it's here are the competencies and here are some examples of how we can do these things, right? And I'll show you more detailed examples. So this information is important for you because you're going to be using the competencies to do a self-assessment later on to determine, which components you feel are important to you. Like we did earlier, we asked you to rate one of the 4 as most important. And then you can choose all 4 if there's 4 in a domain to make important to you. And I'll talk to you about that and show that to you in a few minutes. But you're going to be doing a self-assessment based on the competencies. You're also going to be looking at performance indicators and examples so that you have a clear picture of what each competency looks like in practice. And then you're also going to have an instructional improvement project, which will be in some way related to the competencies. So whether it's that you choose to focus on a particular competency for your overarching project, or maybe multiple competencies in terms of lesson planning and building and things like that, that will be up to you. But you will be tying those competencies into your instructional improvement project that will be due at the end of this academy. So we have 4 domains. Domain 1 is to monitor and manage student learning and performance through data. Now, I noticed a couple of you in the chat have already mentioned that evaluation is based on data. So we're not trying to take away from what you're already doing, but maybe add to it a little bit. Domain 2 is to plan and deliver high-quality, evidence-based instruction. Again, we talked about data in Domain 1. Domain 2, we're still using evidence-based instruction, right? So whether we're looking at data, we're looking at peer-reviewed resources, things like that, we're doing evidence-based instruction, things that we know work based on data and evaluation. Domain 3 is to effectively communicate, to motivate, and engage learners. And so that's one of the domains that quite a few of you actually were very interested in, was that communication and motivation aspect. So that's Domain 3, where we'll talk about how to effectively do that to a diverse population that we serve in adult education. And then Domain 4 is to pursue professionalism and continually build knowledge and skills. Domain 4 is a little bit more about your internal teaching practices and professional development and how you learn and grow. So then when we get into the competencies in their organization, there are 4 domains, 17 competencies within those 4 domains. And within those 17 competencies, there are 57 total performance indicators. And then those performance indicators are each accompanied by a sample illustration, which is an example of the competency in action that accompanies each one of those performance indicators. So if we're looking at a competency and we're saying, this is how we know if you meet that competency, and here's an example for us to look at to say, this is a way in which you can meet that competency. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that in a second. So when we're looking at domain 1, for example, we have these 4 domains: assess learners, prior knowledge, learning needs, college readiness, set learning standards and goals, adapt instruction based on formative and summative assessment, and then monitor learning through summative and formative assessment data, right? So those are the 4 domains that fall within domain 1. From there, we also have the various competencies that fall into those domains. Domain 1 has 4 individual competencies. So if you're looking at the document, this would actually begin on, I believe, page 6 of the document. You start to see these different competencies laid out after the introduction and everything. And so in this case, we see the domain as monitor and manages student learning and performance through data. And then the competency is would be assess learners' prior knowledge, learning needs, college, and career readiness goals, right? So then the next element here is the performance indicator. How do we know that we're able to do that? And that falls directly to the right of the competencies when you're looking at them. And then the last piece is the sample illustration. And that's a description of something you could do to meet that competency. And we're going to look at this exact one in a few moments. So if we're looking at how do we monitor and manage student learning performance through data, that would be our domain 1.1. So the sample illustration for domain 1.1, which falls all the way to the right, would be this. On the first day of class, the teacher of a multi-level ESL class identifies learners' needs and proficiency levels by asking learners to do quick writes to describe themselves. The students can use pictures, words, sentences, and/or paragraphs. These quick writes coupled with short student surveys about their goals. So notice if our competency is to assess learners' knowledge, our performance indicator is to collect and review information on the learner's content knowledge, prior learning experience, etc. So then we have our illustration, which let me go back and make it a little bigger for you again, which is talking about doing exactly that. Now, question for you in the chat, based on this example and what we're trying to see here, we want to say, do we assess learners? Are we collecting and reviewing information adequately? Here's an example of how we do that. Based on this example of having the students do the quick writes to describe themselves, the things that they feel proficient at, and their goals, is this something that you or your teachers already do? And if it's not, then how would you go about doing that? How do teachers know what their students' goals are? What mechanism are you using to collect those goals from students? So is this type of activity something you currently do? And if not, how do you collect goals? Jose said yes, that is something they're doing. Awesome. Hey, Desiree said this is something we do already. So as you can see, for a few of us already, we know that this is something that you already do. Pedro says we do both. We do the quick writes and then we also do goals. So that's fantastic. So when we're looking at the competencies, I don't want you to feel as if, oh man, I have to start doing all this new stuff, although there might be instances in which you do need to continue to grow and build and do something new and implement new things. But a lot of times you'll see that there's stuff that you're already kind of doing when you start looking at those sample illustrations. Amy says, yes, she does that. Jennifer does as well, in addition to other goal setting activities, right? Romney says, she creates an ITEC plan, which is a short and long-term goals plan. Great, thank you. All right, so that was just an example of how when we're looking at the sample illustrations, you might see some of the things that you're already doing reflected in those sample illustrations, and then you might get ideas for different things that you can do to improve. So let's look at another domain, domain 3. And so by doing this, I'm just kind of modeling a way that we can look at the competencies to help you kind of think about instructional areas that might be good to focus on. So we're going to do it again. So we've just looked at assessing learners. So let's look now at monitoring learners through summative and formative assessment data, right, over here in domain 1, competency 3. So domain 1, competency 3, says that we use a variety of formative assessment tools such as classroom observations, lesson closure discussions, portfolios, quizzes, etc. And so if we're going to the actual document, if we were looking at this in links, we would see this information listed here, monitors learning through summative assessment data. And then we look at the performance indicator that says that we're using a variety of assessment tools. And so it lists out the specific types of assessment tools we could use. So let's look at the sample illustration for Domain 1, Competency 3. At the end of each day's lesson, an ABE instructor asks learners to write individual responses to 1 or 2 brief prompts related to that day's key lesson objectives. These answers provide the instructor with a snapshot of student understanding that the instructor combines with other formative assessments and planning for the next lesson. So it sounds like this instructor is using a form of exit tickets or having students write out things that they are learning and tying that directly to what the objectives were for the day. So is this something, if we're talking about Domain 1, Competency 3, which is using a variety of assessments, is this something, this type of strategy, which is questioning and asking questions connected to the objectives, is that something you or your teachers currently do? And if not, how do teachers know whether students are learning? What types of formative assessments are you doing? And again, you'll want to put that into the chat. Are you using this type of strategy in your teaching or at your agency? And if not, what strategies are you using for assessment? You can put that into the chat. How are you gauging if students have got the information by the end of the day? Okay, Pedro says writing samples. What did I learn today? Survey. Thank you, Pedro. Jennifer says some instructors do this, others will do evaluation activities within the lesson, perhaps next class review. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Amy said some type of exit tickets, this one or a similar strategy, polls, surveys, evaluations. Okay, thank you, Amy. So again, it looks like, yes, instructors each instructor has a different method, okay. Writing samples, review at the end of the day, review the next day, wonderful. So again, we see that when we're looking at this particular competency in Domain 1, that this illustration is similar to something that we're already sort of doing, right? And so but the thing about it is we want to make sure we're being intentional about it, right? And I'm sure you are. So when you're doing these things to identify did the student learn or did they not, we're intentionally trying to connect it back to those objectives, or we're intentionally trying to make sure that we're varying and differentiating with the types of assessments that we're doing. Romney said students are given an assignment to test knowledge of the concept learned. Wonderful, thank you, Romney. Righty. So is this an area that's working well, or does it need some additional focus or improvement? What do you think? Based on what you've already told me what you're doing, do you think this is already working well for you, or do you think this is a competency and domain area in which you could improve upon? Pedro says could be improved. Okay. Romney says it works well. Okay. Can be improved. Some teachers are very familiar with the concept, others not. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Amy says working well. Juliet says instructors don't do it continuously. Okay, so not consistent. Right, and we want to make sure that that all of our instructors are doing this, right? That we're all being consistent, so students, no matter what class they're in, are receiving the same level of equitable education. Desiree said it works, but I believe we could always improve on this, right? Some instructors doing well, Ryan says, definitely have identified areas of improvement. Great, thank you guys for sharing and for your candor. So we're using this process as you're going through and you're doing your self-assessment, and we'll talk more about how to access that and everything. We're actually sort of already talked about it, but Beth did share the link within the chat, and then we'll be posting the link into the portal. But you're going to be doing a self-assessment, and after you do that, you're going to consider one or more competencies that you want to focus on for your project plan, and ask yourself the 3 questions that we just answered when we said, you know, is this something that me and other teachers at my site do? If we're not doing this, then what's the alternative? And is this an area in which I can grow, or an area in which we could improve, right? So you want to ask yourself those 3 questions as you're looking at the competencies. You don't want to be, What you don't want to do is mark every single competency as highly important and then have a really hard time trying to narrow it down. I know for me, when I first looked at the self-assessment, when I was first engaging with it, everything seemed equally important to me, and everything seemed like something I really needed to focus on as an educator. And then so I really had to focus on areas where I felt like I needed the most improvement and then narrow it down from there. So you don't want to become tempted into doing a project based on, all 57 of the competencies. I'm sorry, all of 57 of the indicators of the 17 competencies. So pick one or more, but try not to pick too many. And then ask yourself those 3 questions. Am I using this? If not, what's the alternative? And is this an area of improvement for me? And then figure out which ones you want to use to focus on your project plan. And your project plan should be focused on your specific areas of improvement and what you want to work on. So you can use a process like we just did, or you can think about whether a particular competency or performance indicator is a good focus for your project. You don't necessarily have to be completely bound to the competencies. We want you to do your project based on, of course, where you feel like your areas of focus are on and connect that to the competency, but it doesn't have to be locked in specifically to just the competencies, although the competencies should play a role. So for example, if you're wanting to increase learner outcomes in your classroom by being more intentional with use of formative assessments, right? That might be your overarching goal, but then you want to go back and look at the competencies that can help you get there, if that makes sense. Does anybody have questions about the project and the process for using the competencies for your project? And we'll talk more about what specifically you have to do for this project, but I mean in connection to the project and your overall competency understanding. Okay, I don't see any questions just yet. And if you have questions, of course, you can always reach out to me, and then I'm going to give you more information about next steps in a moment. So before we go into next steps, homework, projects, and things like that, let's talk a little bit more about the portal. So the portal is your community of practice. You went to the portal most likely to access this webinar, or you got the invite from Olga, who's wonderful. In your portal, let me just ask really quickly, have all of you been on the portal so far? Do you know where it is? Do you know how to access it? Amy says yes, no problem. Great. Jennifer has. Desiree, Rami. About Ryan and Pedro. Juliet. I think Juliet, I know you have before. Ryan, yes. Great. Okay, so it seems like for the most part we're familiar with it. So I want to talk more about the purpose of the portal and how we're going to be using the portal for this particular academy. So the community of practice, we're using a community of practice model, first of all, for this academy. A community of practice are a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something, and then they do an activity or they learn together and they figure out ways to interact to improve an outcome or to work on a particular project. They ultimately share some type of a common interest. Now, they won't necessarily all be working on, like in your case, you're not all going to be working on the exact same project. You all will each have your own individual projects. However, we will all be working towards a common goal, which is overall instructional improvement, right? And so we'll be able to support each other, help each other, and work together in order to talk more, in order to better engage with the improvement that we want to have happen. So for example, if I get stuck on something, then I want to be able to go to my community of practice and ask my colleagues and ask the facilitator, what can I do to get out of this issue? Or if I want to celebrate something and I have major accomplishments that I want to share with the group, or I'm really excited because an aspect of my project is going really well, then you can also share that and get feedback and kudos from the community. The portal is where the community of practice on leadership will interact. It's where we're going to be talking the most. You'll have assignment templates posted there, all of our recordings and handouts and great things like that, slides and handouts and things like that that we're using will go into our community of practice. Your presence and your contribution to the community is what will actually make it function and work well. I will be interacting with you, our TCAL team will be interacting with you, as will Amy, but we also need you to interact with us and interact with each other. A lot of times we don't ask questions and someone else might be wondering the same thing and also doesn't want to ask. So if you have a question, no matter how big or how small, feel free to go ahead and pop that question into our community of practice, because someone else might be wondering the same thing, and that'll give us an opportunity to address it and answer it for one or more of you. Beth pointed out our COP is named ILEA Cohort 2 in parenthetical 2020, so you'll look for that. You should see it on your homepage when you go in, depending on how many communities you're registered with. And like I said, within the community, you can ask questions. We'll be posting assignments. And it's also a place where we can share resources with you, and you can share resources with us and the rest of your colleagues that are part of ILEA. So if you have a really cool resource that you came across that you really would like to share with the rest of the group, then go ahead and pop it into the community of practice, and then everybody has it. You'll be able to access our community of practice through the twcs.csod.com website. All of you said you've been there, so it looks like you don't have any issue getting to it. You're already a member. Slides and handouts and information will be posted there, so you don't have to worry about that too much. And then this is sort of what the home screen looks like. So what we're going to do now is talk about a little bit more about next steps in detail, what's going to happen next, where everything's going, and things like that. But before I do that, I just want to check, is everybody understanding about the competencies? Do we need to go back through that again? I just want to make sure everybody understands how the competencies function, how they flow, what they look like, just to make sure you kind of are with me. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about the self-assessment in just a second, but I want to make sure everybody understands in relation to the competencies. Any questions specifically about the competencies themselves? Hey, Amy says nope. Thank you, Amy. Alrighty, so our next steps. So we have our next webinar is February 19th from 2 to 3. We'll have training in Austin, which we'll get to see you guys on March 3rd, and gals. We'll talk about at that training the adult education teacher competencies, your leadership vision statement. We're going to talk about measuring impact and data analysis by using data and data-informed decision-making, tools for collecting data, communication in teams, why that's important, how to effectively communicate in a collaborative environment. Because as teachers, we know that data tells us and research tells us that teachers do better when they collaborate together. So we want to definitely encourage that communication and collaborative communication. And then talk about what makes a good project. So we'll definitely dive way deeper into the project aspect of this in March. But I just want to make sure you guys were aware, and gals, that that was coming, and that wasn't, I didn't want it to feel sprung on you. Your work team. Oh, thank you, Beth. Yeah, I keep forgetting that you guys have teams, which is a data system, and you have teams. In this situation, I'm referring to your work teams, not your teams. Thank you, Beth, for pointing that out. So your instructional improvement project, let's talk about what that's going to entail. So today I want you to just start thinking about it, okay? Think about what areas you already feel like you can improve upon, and things like that. You'll also have the opportunity to do the self-assessment, so that might help you. But if you already have something in mind, just start kind of thinking about that. In February, after the February 19th webinar, you'll have an opportunity to review some past projects, see what the previous ILEA cohort did, maybe draw from there, learn from some of their successes and some of their challenges, which I think is a really great thing to do. April 22nd, you'll come up with 2 possible topics. So you'll narrow it down to 2 different topics that you think you might want to focus on. May 1st, your project plan will be due in the portal. So after you've narrowed down, come up with your 2 topics, you'll narrow it down to your 1 and come up with your project plan. June 2nd training, we'll discuss and plan by topic. July 7th, there will be 3 project slides due in the portal. We'll give you a template for those slides so you don't miss any elements that go into those slides. And then July 21st to 23rd, we'll have small online group meetings. We're thinking that those groupings will probably be based on the domain or the topic in which you guys decide to focus on, but it's really going to depend on what kind of projects you all decide to do. And then the November 10th training, you'll have a project poster and a final presentation. And then Beth pointed out that some of the former ILEA participants will be doing a session at TAILE. I hope I pronounced that right, which is your conference in Texas. I know some of our thank you, Saturday at 8 to 9:15, Salon E. there will be a panel on empowering instruction from the ILEA Cohort 1 from last year, which was the pilot year. So if you're able to make that, that would be a really great, and it's Saturday, I don't know what day of the month that is, Olga, if you can put what actual date that is. February 15th. Thank you, Olga. So on February 15th, if you're able to make it, if you're attending already, if you can attend, that would be a great opportunity for you to hear directly from that cohort and hear what their successes and their challenges were as they're working on the various projects. So this is your project, what your project planning template will look like. It's going to be posted in the portal. Just take a look, just kind of when you get a chance to sort of look at what that looks like, thinking about what the components and elements of the project will be. This will be posted in the portal, so feel free to grab it and look at it and just kind of start internalizing it a little bit. Sort of knowing what goes into that planning template might help you sort of think about what you want to plan for. And then also when you're writing your goal statements, make sure your goals are SMART. SMART being specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, right? And that measurable piece seems to be the part people have a hard time with when it comes to writing SMART goals, is remembering to include how you intend to measure it or make sure that it is measurable. So when you're writing your goals, just make sure that it is a SMART goal and that you really can measure it, because remember, we're thinking about data-based decision-making and making classroom and instructional choices based on data. So we want to make sure we're doing that even in the planning process for instructional change. So make sure we're working on having SMART goals there. So in preparation for your February 19th webinar, you're going to complete the Adult Education Teacher Competency Self-Assessment. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a couple slides. And then you're going to print and scan your results and email them to me, Sudi, and also bring them to training in March. So there's two different things you're doing. You're printing and scanning the results and emailing them to me, but you're also going to bring it with you in March. The reason why you're emailing it is so that we can get an overall look for the whole group and figure out what the areas of focus are for the entire group. So we're not going to necessarily be targeting you individually, but we want to kind of understand where each of you are before the training. So make sure you scan and email it to me, but then also bring it with you in March, okay? You're going to identify which domain or competency might be a focus of your project. Again, you're not expected to have those two areas of focus identified or your two possible topics identified until April, but we want you to start kind of identifying what competencies you might be focusing on. Then you're going to also read the 6 fundamental skills every leadership practice. That's also going to be in our community practice area. And then you're going to view a pop webinar in the portal. Well, this will be assigned to you. It'll appear on your transcript. Our wonderful folks at TCall will make sure that that happens, because they always make sure these things are done. And I'll be posting things for all of you as well. Additionally, for the self-assessment, and that's that first component, you're going to go to the LINKS website. Again, I'm going to post this in the portal so you have it, and it's also in the chat, to the self-assessment. Read the instructions and complete the assessment. Make sure you're reading each of the performance indicators and the illustrations for each competency. That way you can make sure that you're gauging how well if you need to improve or not realistically. You might read the competency and then read the indicator and be like, I don't know, maybe I need to work on this. But then you read the illustration and think to yourself, oh, I guess I do that pretty well already. So make sure you read it thoroughly so that you're picking areas that you really do have area of improvement and not something that you feel like you may or may not. That way you just have a better idea of what it is. You're going to complete the reflection column. I'm going to show you in 1 second what that looks like. And your three highest rated competencies. And those are and by the highest rated, and I'll show you that in 1 sec, it's going to talk about what you feel like you need the most areas of improvement, or what you feel like, what needs the most area of improvement. It's scaled from 1 to 4, 4 being I need more improvement, 1 being I don't need as much. So that's why when we say your highest rated competency would be the area in which you need the most improvement. And then you're going to comment on those, your top 3. And then again, print, scan, and email it to me, swhalen@air.org. And I'll, again, post my email address within our portal. And then bring a copy or a digital copy. If you don't want to print it out, you can bring it on your tablet or laptop, or I guess you could do it on your phone. It'd be really hard to see the whole thing on such a tiny screen. But just make sure you have it with you, either printed or digitally, so you can access it in March. So let's look at what this actually looks like. So when you go to the website to do the self-assessment, this is what the whole thing looks like. And so you can go in and you select which areas you feel like are most relevant or least relevant, high priority or low priority, and then which ones you feel like you need the most improvement on. Overall, for example, with the first domain and the 4 competencies within that domain, there's overall 48 possible points or total that you can get for 48. So if you choose, you can add that out of 48 in there if you want to look at that. You don't necessarily have to, but that's an option for you. And then from there is when you go over and you'll scroll to the right and you'll see where it has the reflections and the self-reflection component so that you can look at what areas you feel like you need to work on. And so let me zoom that a little bit more. And so then here is where you will actually type. So this is on the far right-hand side of the self-assessment. You'll be able to actually put your self-reflection in there. Why do you feel like you need to work on this? Or I need to work on this particular one. This is my one I want to make set a goal about. And then possible professional development activities you can do related to that. It could be, learn more at ILEA, or it could be engaging in a professional development opportunity through TCall that's already in the portal, or maybe it's something that's already being offered to you, or a course, or it depends on what the competency in the indicator is. But we want to indicate what possible professional development activities you could do, as well as your self-reflection on your scoring. All right, so does anybody have questions about the self-assessment? Do you want me to go back through that? Do you kind of understand what you're seeing? Any questions in general about what's coming up? We'll receive an outline of these instructions by email. I don't know if Olga's going to be sending that out in an email, but we could if that's what you guys would like. Olga, can we do that?
I think it's going to be placed.
It's definitely going to be in the
community of practice, right? In the community of practice, yes.
Yes, Amy, absolutely. It will. These will be in there. So you have to. So to answer your question, Beth, technically you can, depending on what browser you're using. If you're using Chrome, for example, when you select print, you can opt to save to PDF and then save it that way. But if you're using, for example, Explorer, it doesn't give you that option, so then you would have to print it and then scan it. So it depends on what browser you're using. So the reason why we said print and scan is because that's applicable to all browsers. But just a quick tech tip, if you're using Chrome, you can hit print and then select save to PDF and just save it as a PDF document. And then just email it that way, and you can skip the whole printing and scanning step. Any other questions? I agree, Beth. Use Chrome. Other browsers are only good for downloading Chrome. Any additional questions? We still have a few more minutes. Olga, is there a way for me to share my screen? Because I do want to just sort of show them what the assessment looks like and how to do the save as PDF option really quick.
Yes, ma'am. Up at the top, you'll see File, Edit, and Share.
Mm-hmm.
If you click on Share and then click on Share Content, it's going to allow you to select your computer screen.
Awesome. Thank you. Alrighty, so you guys should currently be seeing my screen, which has the picture of the actual self-assessment window open. This is what it looks like. Am I zoomed in? Let me zoom out a little bit. And so as you're rating each one of the competencies, when you click on when you go to the competency here, you can actually click to view the performance indicator and then click to view sample illustrations. Let me make that a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. So for each one, by default, they're closed, but you can actually click to open and see them. So when I was saying to make sure that you read all of this, that's what I was meaning, to take a look at what the illustrations are and what the indicators are to identify if you're already doing this or if this is an area that is an area of growth for you. And then as you fill these in, as you notice on my screen, I've selected that all of these are relevant. They all are the most important. They're all top priorities. So I got 48 maximum points, right? But realistically, if I wanted to say that, this is relevant to me, but I'm already very proficient at it, so it's not a high priority, you'll notice the score goes down. And then as I scroll over, I can enter in any kind of goals that I have and what types of things I want to do in order to fix that. So if I say that I want to improve, that this is the area for growth for me, and I want to participate in a course specific to this topic, then I could do that. So when you're done, after you've done, after you're finished rating yourself for all 17 competencies and indicators, which is 54 of them, I believe, you can come down here and click Print Assessment. When you're in Chrome, when you go to Print Assessment, you have the option to save it as a PDF. And then from there, it just gives you a save window so you can actually save that PDF for yourself. So that was what I was meaning when I was saying if you're using Chrome, you can just save it as a PDF. Then you can skip the scanning, print and scan option. But if you're not using Chrome, you will need to print it and then scan it. And so that's what that looks like. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. Okay, any questions about that?
So Pedro has a question. Is this presentation going to be available to review and see it or hear it again?
I believe we will have the recording posted. Is that correct, Olga?
Once we take it through the process, it has to go through a post-production process.
Mm-hmm.
Then it will be posted in the community. Actually, it'll be available for people to go back and watch and view. But Beth says that they will post the slides in the community practice. And of course, the recording will be available in the PD portal after it goes through the post-production process.
Wonderful.
And it may be, I think they put a rush on it, so it could be within the next week or so.
Okay, so you'll have access to the slides right after this, Pedro, but it might be about a week or so, what Olga's saying, before the recording is available. But you will have the access to the slides, and the slides do give you the step-by-step kind of scaffolding as to how to access the, how to use the competencies and how to use the self-assessment. And if you have any questions in between time, you can absolutely ask me. Oh, you want to know how to access that? Okay, let me show you. Oh, I already have that open. Look at that.
Share your screen.
Content, and there we are. So if I'm going into the portal, so I'm here. Let me log in. Okay, and so from here, I see all of my transcripts and all my great stuff, but I'm going to go to my community. So I'm going to select all communities. That's how I always access it. And then here we have the two Leadership Excellence Academy cohorts. Yours is ILEA Cohort 2. And the URL for this is in the slides. And this is the fabulous picture of our cohort from last year. They were a great group. And this is where we'll be posting everything. If you click topics, you'll see the various folders for announcements, project plans, etc.
So where are you going to post all of the assignments?
So I'll be putting things in the slides and handouts. Well, the assignments, I'm actually going to have to create a new folder for assignments, I think. Yeah, so I'll create a new folder for assignments so that you guys have one in here. And within that, it'll have listed the individual assignments. The ones that you're doing right now, in terms of the self-assessment, that you'll email, but there will be a link of a reading for you to do and a couple of other things that we'll post in there for you. So you'll see that within the next hour or so. And you'll all get, because you're enrolled in the community of practice, you might have already noticed that every time something gets posted into this community of practice, you might already be getting emails. So you might notice a couple of emails coming in letting you know something new was posted. And if you don't know how to turn, if you're not getting those emails, then do what I did and ask Olga how to turn that functionality on. Yes, and Beth points out we will be taking a picture of you guys in March. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to meeting all of you. Does anybody else have any questions? We still have about 3 minutes about the portal, about the self-assessment, about the competencies. Okay, well, you have my email address, and I'll be posting things in the portal shortly. If you have any questions, if you need assistance, if you get stuck on anything, please do not hesitate to reach out. I am really happy to help and support you guys and gals in any way that I can. Amy, did you want to add anything?
No, I think this was terrific, and I'm really looking forward to meeting everybody too.
And again, don't forget to post your, thank you for pointing that out, saying that, Olga. Don't forget to post your questions in the community of practice if possible, because that'll give me an opportunity to respond to you in a way that your colleagues can also see it, because they may have the same questions that you have. So please give us the opportunity to help them learn while you're learning as well. Okay, well, if there are no further questions, I will turn us back over to Olga. Thank you all so much. I'm looking forward to our next webinar in February and seeing all of you in March.